Welcome to the first episode in this new series, Magnus versus Hikaru, in which we will review games in this rivalry which has lasted well over a decade between Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura. And so this first game is a blitz game, so only 5 minutes per side with 2 seconds added per move. And so the game begins here with Nakamura with the white pieces playing Carlsen with black, and after d4, opening with the queen pawn, knight to f6, a flexible move that may indicate a King's Indian defense, or d5 could be played, other possibilities as well. And so after c4, taking control of the center, Carlsen responds with e6. So this could lead to a Nimzo Indian, a Queen's Indian, and so here Nakamura moves knight to f3 and waits to see what Carlsen will do next. And here we have b6, the Queen's Indian defense. So this move allows the bishop on c8, which can have problems after this e6 move. The pawn blocks in this bishop, so the bishop can move here to b7 or even to a6 to put pressure down the center into the king side. And so Nakamura responds with g3, and he will place his bishop on g2 here to prepare for castling, but also to line this bishop up through the center and fight black's bishop for control of this diagonal. And so here the bishop moves to a6, putting pressure on this pawn, attacking it, and forcing white to defend. So the queen is moved to c2 to defend the pawn. And then now the bishop moves back to b2 here, where it is normally placed to control the center and fight for this diagonal. And so we have to remember this is a blitz game, so quick moves are made and probing by both sides, and so maybe not always the best move is made. But one thing that's very interesting about this blitz game, if you follow the computer evaluation up here on the right hand side of the screen, you'll notice that this game remains quite even the whole way through the game, which is pretty impressive for a blitz game. And it just shows how good these players are. These are two chess legends, two of the greatest players of all time, and Nakamura especially known for being very good at blitz games and even faster time controls. And so we have bishop to g2, and of course Carlsen is excellent all around, a great player. And so we have bishop to g2, fighting for control of this diagonal, and white is prepared to castle kingside. And now the bishop is developed, and black can castle to the king side as well. But we have check with this bishop. And so here, bishop to d2 is played by Nakamura, and he's not afraid of exchanging off bishops here because this is a bad bishop which will be restricted by his pawns in the center, especially if this pawn moves to e3, and then with the pawn on e3 and d4, having pawns on the same color as your bishop in the center will very much restrict its mobility And so this is known as a bad pawn because it is closed in by its pawns that are on the same color as the color squares this bishop is on. So anyway, after this, instead of trading immediately, a5 is played to protect the bishop to gain space on the queen side, and if white decides to capture here, then this pawn could recapture and open up a file for this rook down the a file here. And so we have castling by white, castling by black, and now a3 is played by Nakamura to force Magnus Carlsen to decide what to do with this bishop here. So we have an exchange, and the knight recaptures. And so here we see that Nakamura has almost completed development. He just needs to place his rooks on probably the C and D files as these pawns are pushed forward, and the rooks from the C and D squares here, C1 and D1, can fortify these pawns if they push forward. And here we see that Carlsen still has to develop his queen, his knight, and both rooks, and so he's a little bit behind in development here. And so the game continues with d5, fighting for control of the center here, attacking this pawn. And after capture, we have capture by the pawn. And now this knight jumps up to this outpost on e5, where it eyes the king side, and it is a good attacking square on black side of the board. And so here this knight moves to a6 instead of heading to the center. Normally knights do not want to move to the edge of the board, but Carlsen has a reason here. From a6, this pawn on c7 may try to move to c5, and it will be supported by this knight on a6. And so we have this knight repositioning to fight against this pawn push here to c5. And now the queen develops and also keeps an eye on this c5 square. So we see a battle building up here where all of black's pieces and white's pieces are eyeing this, well, not all the pieces, but a large portion here of both sides' pieces are starting to pile up on this c5 square. And then we have e3, just fortifying this pawn in the center. And now finally c5 is played. And so here a capture with the knight, exchange of the knights, and now Carlsen has these two pawns side by side controlling the center of the board. And white is left with this backward pawn on an open file, but black does have this isolated pawn on a5, which could become a weakness. And so now this rook, which was not doing much on a1, moves towards the center to this open, well, excuse me, half open file, and these pieces will put pressure on this c5 pawn. And so the rook on f8 moves over to help fortify this pawn. And so now the queen and the rook are attacking, and the queen and rook here defend. And so now the final piece that wasn't really doing much, the rook on f1 moves to d1 here to try and control this half open file and put pressure on this d5 pawn. And so now we have h6, which is played to perhaps give some breathing room in the future here where the king may want to escape to h7, although that is not possible now as the queen covers this spot here. And this move may prevent a knight from jumping to f3 and then g5 at some point. And now we have a queen maneuver up to f5, trying to put more pressure on the center, but also this rook on c8 was lined up on that queen, so the queen could move out of that possible attack by this rook if pawns are exchanged off here. And black takes more space on the queen side by moving to a4 here. And it also freezes these two pawns. So this one pawn moves forward and prevents this pawn, or at least slows it down. The pawn still could move but would be captured, but then white would be left with an isolated pawn, and black would get rid of his potentially weak isolated pawn here if b3 was played and an exchange. So now we have rook to c2. So here this gives flexibility for possibly moving this rook on d1 over to c1 and creating a battery with these two rooks. And now we have bishop to c5 is played, and here this may open up the possibility of a rook moving to b8 and attacking this backward pawn here. Also, the bishop could reposition from c6 here to a possibly b5 attacking this diagonal, or as we will see in the game, this bishop to d7 move attacking the queen. And so the rooks do pile up, creating a battery on this half-open c-file. Now they attack this pawn, but we have bishop to d7. So now the pawn is guarded, but the queen has been attacked here. And we must keep in mind that this is a 5-minute game, and so the moves were rushed. Probably at this point time was scarce, and so with this attack on the queen, if we look at the evaluation, and through this entire game the computer evaluation has remained about even for the whole game, which is impressive in a fast blitz game, and we see just how good these players are. But now time may have been a factor, so this queen is attacked by the bishop on d7, and if we look at the computer evaluation, only one move is possible here, and it's a queen retreat to d3. And here instead queen to f4 was played, and now we see the first mistake of the game played by Nakamura, and the evaluation has dropped here, so it has drastically gone to black's favor in this position, and we see why here. The best move, and of course Magnus Carlsen jumps on this move with g5, and so now the queen is under attack, and there's nothing white can do here. The queen will be lost, as the queen cannot move along this fourth rank, as black's pawns cover all these squares, the knight covers this square, and this g5 pawn covers the remaining squares as well as attacking the queen. And so here Nakamura resigned. If he had tried to retreat to this only square where he would not be under attack, this queen to f3 square, then we would just have the bishop attacking here with bishop to g4, and the queen would be trapped on this f3 square. And so here Nakamura resigned, and this was just a very interesting game where it was a blitz game with only 5 minutes plus 2 seconds added per move. And so surely time played a factor. And I don't know how much time they had left at the end of the game, but the queen was trapped and Nakamura resigned. So I hope you've enjoyed this first episode of this new series, Magnus versus Hikaru, in which I will review games and follow their rivalry over the years. And watching and studying the games of these two great chess legends will definitely help improve your game as well. And so I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, please like and subscribe, and feel free to leave comments or suggestions. Thank you, and have a great day.